and Jack for Cultaholic. Have you watched it yet, Jack?
Read the standing orders, Tom. Read them
is.
and understand them.
And understand them! Gosh, it's a Netflix series waiting to happen.
My favourite bit of that, and if you don't know what we mean, watch the intro of the previous news video, is the bit where she kicks him out and then you just hear like, she just kicked him out. She kicked him out. You just hear the muffled in the background. Pablo's very curious today with what's going on, isn't he?
Hello, buddy. You coming to do some wrestling news with us? Or are you hungry because it's your lunchtime? Probably the latter. But he can stay for the wrestling news. A Brock Lesnar WWE return is on the table. We have details of a scrapped SmackDown star's push. And which WWE Hall of Famer wants one more match in Saudi Arabia? We'll talk about it in a bit. But first, been a while since we mentioned the big lad, the final boss of professional wrestling, Brock Lesnar in the news today. Jack, why are we talking about Brocky Doodah?
Well, because Dave Meltzer has suggested that a return for Brock Lesnar is on the table. And not just a return, but possibly the idea of another clash between Lesnar and Reigns at a future WrestleMania. Not this coming one, but at a WrestleMania in the future. That will be the third time that the two have clashed at WrestleMania, and presumably it will be the main event. So it will be the third time that we've had that main event as well, if it were to go ahead.
Do you reckon it'll be another case of mashing the finisher for 4 minutes and going away?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think I and a lot of people preferred the WrestleMania 31 version, which was more of a match, and then Rollins cashed in, of course. But even before Rollins cashed in, much preferred that as a match to 34, which was more of the mashy finisher style. Now, this would revolve, presumably, and Meltzer suggests that as well, it would revolve around Paul Heyman, perhaps, because he's obviously managing Roman Reigns. If Brock came back, would they fight over him? Would he be the prettiest girl at the dance, is what I'm saying, Tom.
It'd be a good angle in which to bring Lesnar back in. The whole idea of it'd be like a soap opera, metaphorically walking in on your partner. Like Brock walking back into the Thunderdome with his suitcases. Hi, Paul, I'm back from my holiday. What? Yeah. And Paul going, it's not what it looks like. Are we ready for Lesnar to come back? In all seriousness.
I mean, I'd say no, but that's from the point of view of a fan who cares about the quality of the product, not necessarily the viewing figures of the product. And we know that Lesnar does ratings, and we know that Vince knows that Lesnar does ratings. So, I mean, it's always a possibility, isn't it?
Exactly. So possibly Paul Heyman's guy making a return. A former Paul Heyman guy had his push scrapped, apparently. Who are we talking about, Jack?
We're talking about, well, Cesaro, I believe, but this is quite a confusing situation involving Cesaro and Nakamura. So Meltzer's saying there have been reports going round about the status of Cesaro. He's either signed or verbally agreed to a new deal a few weeks ago. Obviously, for fans of Cesaro in WWE, that's really good. For fans of Cesaro who might want to see him thrive outside of WWE, that is quite disappointing. But, it's whatever. It's his choice, it's his life, it's whatever he wants to do. Now, the gauntlet match that Adam Pearce won on SmackDown, apparently, that was supposed to be Cesaro in the Nakamura role. You know how Nakamura beat like 3 guys in a row, one of them being Daniel Bryan. Apparently that was Daniel Bryan's idea, and he initially pitched that for Cesaro, but because he hadn't signed the new contract or agreed to a new contract at that point, it was switched to Nakamura. So originally, it was going to be Cesaro getting this push, but because he hadn't signed yet, it was moved on to Nakamura. Because of that, I don't know if the Nakamura push is going to continue, or is it just going to now fizzle out? And are we going to pick up that Cesaro push again? There's a lot of questions here.
Yeah, now that it seems as if he is presumably back within the fold, by the looks of things, it's one of them where I would hope that they would get behind Cesaro. Daniel Bryan's a big fan of Cesaro, and some of the younger guys in general. Cesaro seems to be that can't miss, never swing type. Ironically, they've never swung with Cesaro in this major role. And I think if they take a chance on him, I think only good things can happen.
Of course.
If the company gets behind Cesaro.
I imagine, or I'd like to think that Bryan perhaps sees a lot of himself in Cesaro a few years ago, like an underutilized babyface who the fans are just ready to get behind, and there's a lot of talk online about him being a favourite, and they want to see him pushed. That's what Bryan was doing, and then it worked. So Bryan might be thinking, well, if that worked for me, look at this guy, surely it would work for him as well.
Also, imagine in front of a proper live crowd, Cesaro going all the way with those wrestlers. Oh my God, he'd be undeniable, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it would be absolutely fantastic. I'm really sad it didn't happen, but at the same time, maybe there's hope for the future.
I'm also sad that we didn't see Angel Garza in the Royal Rumble, Jack.
Tom, I'm not so sad that we didn't see Angel Garza in the Rumble because I'm a really big fan of his. I think he's absolutely superb. But the spot reported in The Observer that he was going to have in the Rumble perhaps wouldn't have helped him out in the long run. Allegedly, he was supposed to be in there and was replaced by Otis late on. But then I think it was pointed out by Ross, maybe, or Sam, Ross, I think, that Otis was... It was confusing because Otis had declared himself for the Rumble and was going to be switched out for Angel Garza. For whatever reason, Garza was switched back out and Otis was back in. So we never saw Garza in the Rumble. And the reason I think that's a good thing is because he was supposed to come in, tear off his pants, and then get immediately eliminated. And I don't think that would... I mean, call me a maverick thinker, but I don't think this would have helped him actually, Tom.
That sounds like an Adam Pacitti Rumble spot, to be perfectly honest.
Yes.
I know it's Garza's shtick. He goes, hey, my trousers come away. Fancy that? I do feel like that would have been a fun Pacitti spot in a WCPW no regrets Rumble.
Adam got some offense in. He hit some right forearms to the back of Martin Kirby. He didn't.
Some call them wrong forearms, to be honest. Some call them wrong forearms. Moving on to Steve Cutler. We talked in the last news video about Steve being released from his WWE contract. The newsletter from the Wrestling Observer has given us a few more details onto the whys, hasn't it, Jack?
Yes. Now, apparently, this is because there were reports, or briefly mentioned, there was kind of like heat between Vince McMahon and Steve Cutler. And in the previous news video, we were like, what does that mean? Where would that have come from? Well, this has shed a little bit of light on this. Apparently, this was supposed to be a disciplinary reason because Steve Cutler essentially was isolating himself because of COVID. Now, a lot of people reckon that this was to do with a New Year's Eve party that Cutler attended, and Vince was furious about this because he'd promised a safe working environment for wrestlers like Roman Reigns, perhaps people who are maybe slightly more vulnerable than others, slightly more concerned about, their health for whatever reason. So in this way, I do understand that. I don't know whether it's a sackable offence because he's clearly not the only one who's been breaching those rules, but I do understand why it would lead to friction between the two parties.
Yeah, it's one of them where because the whole independent contractor malarkey, it isn't as cut and dry as, oh, you can't fire me for that. Well, if you're an independent contractor, there's a multitude of reasons and no doubt constantly changing as well because of the status of the industry. And if Vince sees that you're almost willing to get COVID. I know that he wasn't, but by having a party, like by attending a New Year's Eve party, potentially putting someone like Roman, who is the big star of the company at the moment, in an awkward situation. And if Vince is going to choose between Roman Reigns and Steve Cutler, unfortunately, I mean, personally, the big dog Steve Cutler's got a nice ring to it. I'm just saying. I tell you what's got a nice ring to it. New Japan back on TV. They've signed a new deal. It's not quite the deal they were hoping for. They don't like it, but they're going to go along with it. Tell us about it, Jack.
Yeah, I think that Meltzer warned us all that it would be perhaps slightly underwhelming if we'd had our hopes built up a lot. But it's still a deal for them. There'll be 10 episodes beginning on the 11th of February, which will cover both nights of Wrestle Kingdom. On the 18th of February, it'll cover the New Year's Dash show. They're going to be, of the 2020, New Year's Dash show, unless he's made a typo here and he means 2021. That doesn't seem to make much sense to me, actually. But anyway.
I think it'd be 2021, I'd assume.
Do you think? This will be a deal with the Roku channel. So basically, it's going to be similar to the time when New Japan was on Access with those 1 hour shows, or AXS, with Kevin Kelly announcing. And it's going to cover the biggest shows, but older events as opposed to events taking place that week. So it's not like Dynamite, it's not like Raw or SmackDown. It's not going to be a weekly television show covering all the regular goings on. It's going to be more of a recap of previous big events on the Roku channel.
Speaking of Dynamite, let's swipe our key card through the forbidden door. Let's talk about what happened on Wednesday with New Japan's new bestest friends, wrestling friends. We had a wedding, but there's a little bit more to it than that, wasn't there, Jack?
Apparently, yeah, if I'm reading this correctly, and I'm not sure if I am, but apparently...
I think you are, and I read it a couple of times as well, and I think how you're reading it is how I read it as well.
Yeah, trying to decipher what Meltzer means here. Basically, he says that the situation regarding the wedding of Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford is that they had legally gotten married before the show, and I think that was already news to people. I think people already knew that. I think it was already known that they were actually married before their kayfabe wedding. But apparently he says this was basically the wedding ceremony. And then he says it's tough because families couldn't attend due to COVID restrictions. Well, that is true of any wedding that takes place these days. But I would suggest it was tough because it was made a joke out of on TV. Presumably they were well fine with that, like totally okay with it because they've already legally been married beforehand. But what's he saying? I don't understand what he means.
I think he's basically saying this is their wedding reception because they didn't get one, and they're saying that this is how they are commemorating their wedding because
right.
It's either this or awkward drinks over Zoom. So yeah. I guess this is the better of the options. But I thought it was quite a cute little story. The fact that they're married before and that's their wedding ceremony. That's lovely because they're not having a wedding anytime soon. Nor are WWE having a show in Saudi Arabia anytime soon. But when they do, and fine now Lamont, one guy is keen to come out of retirement for one more match. Who are we talking about, Jack?
Yes, we're talking about Booker T, who on his Hall of Fame podcast has been talking a bit about his match with Triple H at WrestleMania 19, infamously when he lost, when he really should have won, probably in the eyes of just about everybody. But he's ready to fight him again, Tom. He said, if Booker T versus Triple H went down, it would have to be in Saudi Arabia because they are passing out big checks. Very honest there from Booker T, fair enough. For me to get in the ring, the situation would have to be right. I would want to get paid to get back in the ring, but I would love to have another match if the situation's right with Triple H. A lot of people think about that match and talk about it, and the ending wasn't what most fans wanted, so many people wanted me to win that night. A couple of the office guys were like, Booker, you should have won that night. Well, you wrote it. Why didn't you speak up? That's very true. I don't lose any sleep over it because I've looked at wrestling like movies and sometimes the bad guy wins. I've never once looked back at that match and thought you should have won it. But clearly, very shrewdly here, Booker is pushing for a rematch. And by the sounds of it, he doesn't care so much if he gets revenge and wins. It's all about, that payday.
It's all about that payday, less about recovering from that pedigree and then just lying there for about 4 hours whilst Triple H slowly crawled over and pinned him WrestleMania 19. I remember that happening. Do you know what? If that was a YouTube video, you'd have got on their back for wanting mid-roll ads. It took that long to get to the point. It was infuriating. But it'd be nice to see Booker T back. I feel like he still does a little bit of odd stuff part-time for reality of wrestling. But this is like a one big WWE match that he wants to draw a line under it all. And him and Triple H, yeah, why not? Weirder things have happened in Saudi Arabia on the pay-per-views. Why not? Book it, Vince. Yeah. Book it, Dano. Love You By Friday on Twitch, by the way, at 4 o'clock. If this is going out before 4 o'clock, if it's not, then you've missed it. Sorry about that. Twitch.tv/Cultaholic. What are you doing this weekend, Jack? A whole lot of stuff?
Not so much this weekend, Tom. But I will say, and I mentioned this on the podcast that goes out later today as well, my Friday series, Replacing Wrestlers of the Week, is coming up shortly, within the next few weeks, but I don't want to put a concrete date on it, but it is in the works, so everybody can, because I've had a few tweets of people saying, when are we going to get down on Friday again? We're going to be getting down on Friday pretty soon, guys. Don't worry about that.
Can you give us any details on what it's about?
No, it's all a secret. It's going to be similar in terms of it's me casting a critical eye at the world of excellent wrestling. If you're
not going to tell people, then I'll tell people because I've got it here in my notebook what your series is going to be about. So I'm going to reveal it to people now.
Well, you have no authority here, Tom.
I'm going to give it. I have all the authority. Jack's new series will be